Good afternoon. I'm Chip Partner, Assistant VP for Communications at the University of Rochester Medical Center. In the midst of devastating losses from COVID-19 worldwide, including nearly 100,000 deaths in the US, there are success stories. People who have been critically ill with the virus and placed on ventilators for weeks, but ultimately have recovered and been discharged from the hospital. We're here today to learn more about one of those success stories from UR Medicine's Strong Memorial Hospital. We're delighted to be joined today via Zoom by a former patient named William Barish, who was an inpatient at Strong Memorial Hospital with COVID-19 from April 1st to April 27th. And here in the studio by Dr. Anthony Pietropoli, Vice Chief of Pulmonary Diseases and Critical Care at Strong, and Jane Shakaitis, the President and CEO of UR Medicine Home Care, which is continuing to provide Mr. Barish follow-up care since his hospitalization. Before we turn it over to questions, we'll ask if Dr. Pietropoli wants to say a few words, and Jane Shakaitis.
Sure. So my colleagues and I have been caring for the sickest of our COVID patients in our intensive care units at Strong Memorial Hospital since the pandemic began in mid-March in Rochester. And we have had many patients come through who have required life support, including mechanical ventilation. These patients typically require weeks of care in the intensive care unit, but with time they often do get better and are able to be discharged from intensive care and eventually from the hospital. What we have seen and has been described previously, but clearly much more so now with COVID, is something called the post-intensive care syndrome, which is where patients require or manifest symptoms of persistent physical disability, sometimes cognitive and sometimes psychological disability after hospital discharge. This syndrome, this post-intensive care syndrome, requires ongoing care after hospital stay. And this is where UR Home Care comes in.
Okay.
So thank you so much for having me, and it is a pleasure to be able to share the work that UR Medicine Home Care has been able to do. Right from the beginning, we've been working in collaboration with our hospital partners to provide a continuum of care for patients who are in the hospital, many of them who are in intensive care unit, but not all of them. But we've created a partnership where every single patient who has required hospitalization gets continued care at home through UR Medicine Home Care. That's always nursing, but also includes physical therapy, occupational therapy. Every patient has telehealth that allows us to monitor them remotely on a daily basis. And so we've been able to see that the success rate of patients who are coming out of the hospital come home, continue to get assistance and intervention until they're fully recovered and then discharged from home care. So it's been great to be a partner in helping people through this disease.
Thank you so much, both of you. We'll open it up for questions from the media. First on the line today was Pat Musanek from WHEC Channel 10. Pat, do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thanks for taking my question. Hello, everyone. Mr. Barish, good to see you successfully come through this. If you can give us a sense of what was it like during the time you were in the hospital. I know it must have been unbearable and grueling, but fill us in on what you were going through.
One second, Mr. Barish, we have to unmute you. It's a problem on our side.
You got me?
Now we can hear you. I'm so sorry. That's our fault. If you could start over, please.
Other than entering, I remember entering the hospital through the emergency section. But other than that, until I was up out of intensive care, I have no recollection of my time in intensive care at all. But I do remember vividly my care on the 6th floor once I left ICU, which was nothing less than spectacular. It was doctors, nurses. I was well informed. I wasn't scared at all because I had such good care from nursing, doctors. I received therapy later in my stay. and I left on the 27th. Luckily, I was able to come home because I had someone home that could care for me. And then I received home care, which was very important to my recovery. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks.
Yes,
Mr.
it
Gray.
does.
And Pat, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, I do. So many people, close to 100,000 people have lost their lives to COVID-19. Obviously, you pulled through it successfully. How does it make you feel to successfully come through this while so many others didn't?
Very lucky and humbled, and I credit my survival. I'm not sure if I went to another hospital that the outcome would have been the same. I really believe that the care I got at Strong Memorial Hospital was truly superb, and I think I got the best medicine available, and that's one of the reasons I survived that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Barish, and thanks, Pat. I'll likely be able to cycle back to you if you have more questions. And next up is Brett Dahlberg from WXXI News. Brett?
Hi all, thanks for taking this time to talk to us. Mr. Barish, I wonder if you can talk a bit about what home care was like, what kind of support you got, and how that might have helped. And then I'd also love to hear from the folks at URMC about how they ensure that the people who are doing those visits are kept safe.
Immediately upon returning home, I had a nurse come a day or two after. She took my vitals and wanted to know if I needed any further assistance. And we talked about my recovery. Shortly after that, I had physical therapy. I was pretty weak when I came home, and they helped me with moving around, make sure I was safe. That was the big thing. And then I have occupational therapy, which is continuing even to this day. The nurse stayed a couple weeks. The physical therapist stayed, I think, 3 weeks. The occupational therapist, I'm still with me, helping me with an issue I have with my right shoulder. So very comforting, very caring, made sure I was safe. That was the most, that was primary to them. And without that, my recovery would be even longer than it is now. So I'm very grateful for that type of service supplied by me.
Thanks, Mr. Barish. And I think, Brett, your second question is answered by Jane Shakaitis in the studio.
Perfect.
Sure. So right from the beginning, and we were full in with addressing COVID patients right out of the gate when this first started, both patients coming out of the hospital as well as patients being diagnosed in the community. So initially we set up a dedicated team, which is now expanded to a large group of our clinicians. They all have the full protection of the PPE. Because we have a wonderful partner in the medical center, we've not had any trouble accessing the PPE that we need. So with every visit, when we first admit patients, we go through all of the standard screening questions. Do you have anybody in your home who's COVID positive? Do you have any symptoms? And we know the patients coming out of the hospital are COVID positive, so we take those precautions right from the beginning. And so our visits are always done with full PPE on. Our staff are all trained. We try to minimize when we need to the amount of time that we're in the home and the amount of physical touch. But with therapy, obviously there's that's part of the intervention. So I'm really pleased to say not a single one of our clinicians has contracted the virus through the home care interventions that we've done because of the PPE and the precautions that we've taken.
Thank you. I'll ask, I see 3 TV stations on the line, but I don't see reporters' names. If anyone from Spectrum or 13 WAM or WROC Channel 8 wants to ask a question, please just come into the chat. You can ask the question there, or just we'll open it up for you to ask a question. And I'll circle back, Brett, with you and with Pat. A question I have for Jane is, I know from Strong, we're just approaching the threshold of discharging our 300th patient. And there's been quite a few handoffs to UR Medicine Home Care. How many patients, after being discharged from a UR Medicine hospital, is your home care group taken care of?
Our total admissions are in the 115 to 120 amount. We currently have a census of 74, so we've been able to discharge. So as we bring in new patients, and we followed a curve. If you look at the hospital curve, that kind of steadily goes up and then kind of flattens out. We were 2 weeks behind that because they were in the hospital for a certain period of time, and that's when our curve started going out. So we're just starting to see a flattening of that. So about 110, 120 patients that we
and that's a total number, and of that total, 72 have been discharged?
We have 74 on census right now,
oh, okay.
So about 40 have been discharged.
So the rest of the balance have been discharged. Okay. I'll turn it back to Pat Mucinek. Did you have any follow-up questions for Mr. Barish or our experts?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
And how about you, Brett?
I'd love to know from the hospital folks, is there anything new that we've learned through treating patients locally? Anything that, like Mr. Barish made it? Some patients don't. Anything that we've learned from the patients who have survived that we're now applying to care for other patients?
I would answer that with a definite yes. Every patient that we see teaches us a tremendous amount. Obviously, this was a new disease to humankind when we first experienced it here in mid-March. And we've learned a lot about the natural history of this disease, how long it takes to get better. We've learned to be very patient, recognizing that patients can be very severely ill for a prolonged period, but then eventually they start showing signs of improvement. Because we've had the necessary equipment, the necessary PPE, other things, we've been able to be patient and take the time. And with that, we've seen a lot of patients make it through this. Not without need for ongoing home care thereafter, because just being sick for that long to that severity takes a lot out of a person. So it takes time to get it back, but patients can survive. We've learned that it takes time.
And Mr. Barish, if I could ask you a question, you said there's a lot you don't remember about your care in the hospital. While you were here, that was a time when, as we still have, we had visitor restrictions, so your family couldn't come and visit you in person. What have they told you since you've been home about their experience while you were in the hospital, and did you get to interact with them before you were discharged from the hospital?
Interact with who?
With your family?
Yes. Well, of course, my family was on the phone with the doctors from the ICU on a daily basis. And when I got upstairs, I could FaceTime and communicate with my family members. And that was instrumental in my recovery. One son would do the administrative things that I needed done, and the other son prepared for me coming home and my care. And my brothers and family members prayed for me and helped me get through this. It was very supportive.
I'm glad to hear that. Could you tell us what your homecoming was like when you finally got discharged and were able to go home? Were you able to have any kind of a party, or were you still kind of just needing to get into home and get UR Medicine Home Care involved?
Mm-hmm. Other than getting home and getting a lot of phone calls and congratulating me and wishing me well, no parties. I was pretty...
That's the question. I mean, that's the answer that Dr. Pietropoli wanted to hear.
Well, I was pretty... I was mostly focused on my recovery, and my family was the same. I did have a grandchild while I was in there, a second grandchild, which was pretty nice, but I haven't been able to see her yet.
Oh, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm not sure we asked you, how are you feeling now? How are you?
Very good. I'm feeling really well. I'm walking I'm walking around Cobb's Hill, around the reservoir, and I'm not to where I'd like to be, but I'm doing much better. Thank you. It's a slow recovery, but slow but sure.
And that invites a question for Dr. Petropoli. After patients are discharged, is a good therapy to kind of walk as you're able and just kind of move around, or what's the follow-up care regimen?
Yeah, I think that's a key question. What does it take to get better? And it is, as Mr. Barish says, a gradual process. What's remarkable about this disease, this COVID illness, is that when patients are in the hospital and in the intensive care unit, they're requiring large amounts of support and large amounts of extra oxygen and pressure in order to get even just enough oxygen into the bloodstream. And what's remarkable is that even after that severity of illness, patients can go home without needing any oxygen, like Mr. Barish, and can walk at Cobb's Hill Park. That's a dramatic recovery, and it can't be understated how dramatic that is. It's going to take time to get back to previous level of functioning, but it is going to happen. The most important thing I can say about this disease is if you can get through it, you can survive and get back to how you were before. So it's not this uniformly fatal problem or one that's associated with necessary long-term morbidities.
And Jane, you've got the perspective of staff that's dealt with more than 100 patients after discharge from the hospital. Is your sense that Mr. Barish's story is fairly common, or is he on the rapid recovery end? And what does recovery look like kind of across the board?
I think he's pretty typical. Once they are able to come home from the hospital, nursing is really important in the beginning just to monitor them medically, but therapy is also really critical to restore the muscle and, just the weakness that comes from extended illness. So that's been an important. And the other thing that I think has been really valuable is the ability to use telehealth. And I would love to hear Mr. Barish's experience with that. But the telehealth unit, we put in every COVID patient's home, and it allows us to check their vital signs and their pulse oximetry levels remotely every day. And we have a nurse monitoring that. So they put their units on and we can see what their levels are. And that allows us to know that if there's something that might be off, we need to go see them and make sure that everything's okay, or contact the physician. So I would love to hear what Mr. Barish's experience was with that.
When nurse told me that they would be doing that, I was really surprised and comforted. Blood pressure, oxygen in my bloodstream is measured daily. And if I don't get it in by noon, they'll give me a call to remind me. Very, very helpful and very comforting to have that system. And I was quite surprised that it was available to me. They've even given me, you can wear something around your neck or a watch. So if you have a fall, you can send an emergency message through. It's quite an impressive system and greatly appreciated by me, for sure.
Have you ever put your caregivers to the test and not put your numbers in by noon? Have you ever gotten one of those?
Yes, I've gotten plenty of those phone calls.
Well, glad to hear that they're checking up on you.
They surely are. The level of care that I received through this whole, from beginning to end, was second to none anywhere that you can get medical care. I have to emphasize that, from the nurses, doctors, communication with my family, truly outstanding and very comforting to me.
It's so kind of you to say, and we're so appreciative because there's thousands of people here working hard to try to deliver that. So it's really wonderful to hear that we've come through for you. Brett or Pat, do you have any follow-up questions for anyone on the panel today?
No, thanks.
Yeah, if that's okay.
Orders means more questions per.
Sorry, say that again, Chip?
Yeah, no, just when we have fewer recorded line, I like to open it up, make sure you get everything you're interested in answered.
Right, I appreciate it. Mr. Barish, I wonder if you can, I guess I'm just curious about what you felt when you woke up and had no memory of the previous 4 weeks or 3 weeks at least. How did you start putting that together, and what was the process of getting back to your home like?
I was on a phone call with my son, and my son told me that I was in the ICU and was on a ventilator for some period of time. I had no idea, no recollection of that. And then, of course, the doctors and nurses informed me also. That's how I found out. And I was just happy to be with us at the time, and didn't give it much more thought than that, and just focused on my recovery. You know, trying to do everything they told me to do, and focused on getting home.
When you woke up, you remembered why you were in the hospital, it sounds like. It wasn't like there was just a huge cloud over.
So I remember my one of my doctors telling me to go to emergency, and she would call. And I remember walking in there. But after walking into emergency and them taking my vitals, I have no recollection until I was on the 6th floor, which was where they sent you when you got out of the ICU.
Wow, okay. And doctors, is this typical of people who are on the ICU or are ventilated?
Yes, this is a very typical scenario. Placing someone on a ventilator, always, we have to use anesthesia to initiate the process of getting the breathing tube in. And then thereafter, patients often require doses of medications to keep them calm and safe while they're on the ventilator, sedative medications. And those medications, together with the illness itself, which drives some inflammation or injury in the brain, together lead to this loss of memory. And it's a very typical situation. I'm glad to hear Mr. Barish moved past that loss of memory. Many patients really have difficulty with that. And one of the things that can help a lot of patients is to have that recollection by family members or going back to the providers to get information about what happened during those 2 weeks or whatever that I can't remember. And just by contextualizing it that way, it can help people move past that, the just disquieting effects of losing that period of time without any memory.
Thanks. I've got one more question on staffing for home care. I just wonder, to what extent is this a time of increased pressure on the supply of staff you have at a time when maybe more people are out because of sickness, or just, I don't know, to what extent are you running low on staff?
Actually, we are doing pretty well. The hospital had to reduce its overall census to prepare for a potential surge of COVID. And so all of the patients that UR Medicine Home Care would normally take who had surgery or were in the hospital for other reasons were no longer being referred. So we had the capacity to be able to handle our COVID patients. So that has not been a problem. We're starting to, right now though, pick up with volumes. And so we're starting to see getting busier and busier now. But we were able to manage through it and not see any real staffing issues.
All right, thanks very much, you all.
Brett, thank you very much. I'll invite anyone, Mr. Barish, I'll wait until the end for you, but if anyone has any final comments, Dr. Pietrapalli, any final thoughts you'd like to share with viewers today?
Well, I just want to thank Mr. Barish for his kind words. And I think that one of the things that the clinical staff, and not just clinical, all the staff, whether it's environmental services or administrative people on the units or the nurses or the respiratory therapists or the doctors. We all just crave these success stories to hear about them and learn about them. It really is a shot in the arm to all of us. So thank you for sharing your story with us on today. I'm sure it will be a huge, as I said, shot in the arm to all staff. So thank you very much.
And Jane, I'll let you offer any final thoughts about UR Medicine Home Care.
Thank you. I think the one message that I would like to share is it's such a privilege for home care to be elevated, to be in terms of kind of our partnership and collaboration as an important part of the solution to this community crisis. And oftentimes home care are kind of behind the scenes and unsung heroes, but we've gotten a tremendous amount of support and recognition for the really important work that the staff are doing out in the community. And so we're very grateful that we have such a great system that supports the work that we do and recognizes the value it brings to the overall continuum of care.
And I know you hear that thanks almost every day from Dr. Michael Pastelakis and Dr. Kathy Paranello, because we are able to discharge patients more safely knowing that UR Medicine Home Care can pick up and we can get patients out of the hospital sooner because of that. Mr. Barish, do you have any final thoughts you want to share for our viewers or for Dr. Pietrapalli and Jane?
Well, just to thank them for their great care, providing great care, and all the nurses and doctors. My heart goes out to the families for people that have COVID-19 and don't have as good an outcome as I have. And please wear your masks.
Thank you. That's a great reminder. Thank you so much, Mr. Barish. I'll echo what Dr. Pietrapalli said. It is a shot in the arm for all of us to hear about success stories. So we thank you for taking the time and sharing so bravely your care journey. That was Mr. William Barish, who was an inpatient at Strong Memorial Hospital from April 1st to 27th. Here in the studio, we're joined by Dr. Anthony Pietrapalli, Vice Chief for Pulmonary Diseases and Critical Care at Strong Memorial Hospital, and Jane Shakaitis, President and CEO of UR Medicine Home Care. I want to thank Karen Christensen on my team for setting this up today. Our intrepid ASL translators, Chris and Will, along with Morgan Underwood from ASL Interpretive Services, and Jeff Mead on the camera, and Corey White on Zoom. Thank you all very much, and we'll close this meeting for today.
Thanks, Al.
Thanks.